The LinkedIn DM strategy I'm about to share in this video has been tested with hundreds of my clients, from video production studios all the way through to illustrators and animators. And the results have been pretty impressive. Let's take David, for example, who was able to secure a meeting with a senior executive at Paramount and win a 5-figure deal. Or Kai, who was able to land Bentley as a client. In this video, you're going to see the exact 5-step LinkedIn DM process that you can use to win your dream clients. I'll even be showing you examples of bad LinkedIn DMs I've received, so you know exactly what type of messages to avoid sending. So let's get into it. Just zooming out for a second, this is kind of how I like to think about LinkedIn. There's sort of 3 elements for me. The first one is your connections. So sort of how you're actually networking. So who are you connecting with? Who is in your network? And doing this consistently is really, really important. The second piece of this is starting conversations with people, actually showing an interest in what they do. And I'm going to get down into what you say and how you structure that in a minute. But actually having conversations with people is so underrated. And interestingly, we're going to talk about DMs today, but conversations don't just have to be in DMs. They can also be in comments, right? So you can start conversations. I do this all the time. I post out a bit of content and someone replies to me and I have a conversation with them. I ask them a question. I don't just say, thanks for the comment, right? And it really helps to understand people a little bit better. It helps to really build that rapport. And then the final piece is content. Now, I said that you don't have to spend hours creating content at the beginning of this video, and that is true. I was able to use this strategy in my own business, and my clients are able to use this strategy actually without creating any content. It just makes it a little bit easier if you have content, because there's something for people to consume. People can kind of see what you're about, understand what you're about, what your business is about, and get some context for that conversation. So these are the 3 C's of LinkedIn. This is how I like to think about it. And every day I kind of think about this as a clockwise process, right? So if I'm constantly doing this, if I'm connecting with new people, if I'm starting conversations and I'm creating content, then I know that landing projects and winning dream clients is inevitable over time. Okay. So they're the kind of 3 C's. So let's look at the 5 elements that make up a good message and a clear message and something that's actually going to get a conversation started. And as I said, you can take this off of LinkedIn, but this is specifically about LinkedIn, and this is kind of where our clients have got the best results. So there's 5 key elements, and I'll just walk you through each one, and then I'll give you a few examples. So the first one is a reason, right? Why are you actually reaching out? What is this about? And there was a study a while ago that showed people who have a reason for something when they're making a request are twice as likely to have that request accepted versus somebody who doesn't have a reason. And I think, or if I remember off the top of my head, the study used several examples, but one of them was cutting into a line. And so someone requested to cut into the line, and they found the people that said, hey, can I cut in because, and gave a reason, were twice as likely to be allowed to cut into that line than people that didn't. And what they actually found was they used a variety of different reasons, and it didn't seem to make a difference about the reason that people actually gave. So whether you're connecting with someone on LinkedIn and you're using a personalized message, or you're actually just reaching out to them directly, the reason is really important. Hey, why are you actually reaching out to me today? The second thing is a compliment, right? Everybody loves to be acknowledged. Everybody loves being complimented. This has always fascinated with me. I get to hang out with some pretty impressive people like Chris Do and Daniel Priestley, other entrepreneurs who have created some amazing things, and they're just human. They like compliments. When I genuinely like something about them and tell them, they appreciate it, right? So people never really get bored of compliments as long as they are genuine, right? Super important. Genuine compliment. Don't just say something for the sake of it. People will see through that. The third thing is what we call an anchor. An anchor is really just something that you have in common with someone. And you've probably experienced this yourself. So how many of you have ever been on holiday and you meet someone from the same town or city as you, or you meet someone who supports the same sports team that you do, and automatically you feel this sense of connection with them. You feel this almost friendship when you don't really know this person, but just because you have that thing in common, you feel connected to them. That's what an anchor is. It's something that anchors you together. The second to last thing is value. This is really, really important. Like, most people want to know, what is in this for me? And I don't just mean the service that you offer. I mean, what is in this interaction for me? And so it's really important that we deliver value, and I'm going to talk you through these in a little bit more detail. Final thing is an ask. What do you actually want me to do? And people miss this a lot. When I get messages on LinkedIn or when people reach out to me, they tell me all this great stuff, or they tell me how important and amazing that they are usually and what they can do for me, but they don't actually ask anything specific. So I'm sat there thinking, this is all great, but what do you want me to do now? Do you want me to book a call? Do you want me to reply to this message? Like, what's the thing that you actually want me to do? And the clearer and easier we can make the ask, the easier this is going to be. So just to confirm, this is the exact framework that we teach our clients, the exact framework that has allowed our clients to land 5- and 6-figure projects directly through cold outreach on LinkedIn. This is the exact framework that I use to build relationships with people who can create opportunities. These are the principles and the framework that goes into every interaction, okay? So I've got this anchor cheat sheet here, which I'm gonna talk to you about in a minute. But the one thing I will say is, just coming back to the second principle I mentioned at the beginning around message like a millennial, you don't have to cover all of these 5 things in one message. You don't have to sort of cram these into one message. You can sort of make this a backwards and forwards thing and drop each one of these in. So the first part of the message could be, hey, I'm reaching out because I love X, Y, and Z. We also do this. And then a question, right? And then you can demonstrate some of this value. And I find this is actually easier to do. You can demonstrate some of this value during the conversation, because it's much, much easier to demonstrate value to someone when you understand what is valuable to them. And this is a big piece of the jigsaw that I won't get too deep into, but that a lot of people miss when they are reaching out. They assume so many things, and I'm going to show you some examples of this in a minute. They assume that you're struggling with this, or they assume that you need this service, whereas really it's much more valuable to listen and to understand what is going on for that person before you then offer some kind of value. So the reason, why are we reaching out? A compliment, what do you generally like about them? And then the anchor, what do we have in common? So I just want to share something with you called the anchor cheat sheet. And the anchor cheat sheet is just a way on LinkedIn that I have found to create anchors fairly easily without spending too much time or thinking too much about this. And one of the reasons I love LinkedIn is because it makes this quite easy. So these are some very kind of simple and basic ways that you can create anchors with people who you maybe don't know in your network. So the first one is sort of like a school or a university. Now, a lot of people like myself went to a university that has tens of thousands of students every year. And so it's pretty easy to connect with someone there in that industry. So one of the things that I'll do on LinkedIn is I will go to LinkedIn and I will go to that school. So for me, it was University of Leeds. I'll go to the University of Leeds and I will look at all the alumni and people that say that they went to the University of Leeds. And LinkedIn is quite good at this as well. It will sometimes suggest, hey, this person also went to the University of Leeds. And I can filter by industry, or I can look at people within the creative space that also went to the University of Leeds. And I can just use that as a really simple anchor. I can say, hey, I also see that you went to the University of Leeds and you studied X. I love what you're up to these days. And then I can ask them a question. I'll get into questions in a minute. But a school or a university or a college or whatever it is quite an easy one. The second one is an event, right? And so there's lots of events that happen on LinkedIn at the moment. And it could just be that you guys went to the same event or you went to the same networking event. This is a really underrated strategy, okay? Just because you didn't meet somebody at a networking event doesn't mean you can't connect with them after the event. So often I actually won some of my best clients when I was running my creative studio. I won some of my best clients from connecting with people at networking events that I didn't actually meet at the networking event. And the way that I did that was I got the list of delegates, the list of attendees, and I went through and I looked at each one of those and saw who seemed interesting and connected with them. And I just used the anchor of I was also at the event last week and I loved X, Y, and Z. What was your favorite thing about that event? And so again, we are just trying to start conversations. Remember, we're not trying to win clients straight away in the first message. Mutual connection, who do you also know? That one's fairly self-explanatory. What about an influencer or a thought leader that they also follow? And I see this quite a lot. So, hey, I noticed that you also follow Brené Brown. I also noticed that you follow Chris Do. What do you love most about their content? Or was there something specific that you like about Chris or the content that he puts out? Again, it's a conversation starter, but it's an anchor. Content is a really easy one. If the person that you want to connect with creates content, and I know that's not everybody, but if they do, then this is a really, really easy one to get your teeth into because you can just anchor something around that content that maybe you also know about or that you're interested in. Let's use the example of wellness entrepreneurs, which one of my clients is currently targeting. If they post about, let's say, breath work or something along those lines, you could say, hey, I noticed that you're currently talking about breath work. I've tried this myself and found it really powerful. I'm curious, what type of breath work have you found to be most powerful for you? Right? And so we're kind of asking and we're looking at that question. Now, I know you're probably thinking, but Matt, where's the value? Well, as I said, initially we want to try and start that conversation. And then once we get a bit of backwards and forwards, we can then offer some kind of value. And what I will say is this works best when the value that you offer is free value up front. And I'm not saying work for free. That's a whole different conversation. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you can offer something and it's not just, hey, by the way, we build websites, would you like to have a conversation? Because then it just kind of feels a little bit transactional and like, oh, you're just starting a conversation with me because you wanted to sell me a website. If you can actually offer them something of value up front for free, where they don't have to pay anything, like an article that you've written, something you found interesting, an introduction to your network. There's 1,000,001 ways to do this. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in a minute. But if you can actually do that, then you will get a much, much better response and people will trust you and you will be doing the first principle that I said, which is giving before you ask. So that's around content, and then obviously a project. So something that they've worked on or a particular project that they have in their portfolio or on their website or whatever is another one. One of the biggest things around messaging is the importance of making it easy. And I talk a little bit about the idea of the brain drain. And the brain drain is really understanding that every interaction you have with someone takes energy, right? And it's actually taking someone's brain power to respond to you. So when you reach out to somebody, think about how much energy are you actually taking from them? What are you asking them to do? So around the questions, use a question that requires less energy. And I often call these this or that questions or closed questions. So let's just go really, really basic and kind of take this outside the context of business for a second. You could ask somebody, hey, what do you prefer, cats or dogs? That's a really simple question to answer, right? Instead of, hey, I'm curious, like, what's your favorite breed of cat and why? It's like, wow, that's a really difficult question for me to answer. Maybe if I love cats, it's interesting and easy, but if I don't, then it's difficult. And so you start asking these kind of complex questions right off the bat about their business and all of this kind of stuff that I see, and it just requires too much brain power. So try and keep those questions easy. Try and keep those things as simple as possible for people to answer. Let's look at some sort of bad examples of messaging. Now, I've kind of blanked out people's names. These are just messages that I personally got in the last few weeks. And I also asked some of my clients to submit them as well. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these because I think it's pretty obvious why these are not good messages. I've blanked these names out. I'm not doing this to sort of call anyone out, but I think it's really, really important to acknowledge some of these. So I think what you can notice about most of these messages is it's very much about them, right? So let me introduce myself. I'm a digital marketing consultant. I help these people, blah, blah, blah. Great. I've done audits for your social media profiles and businesses. And so this person is getting there with the value, but the problem with this, and this is what I mentioned before, is people do things to me and I feel a little bit guilty because someone will go and do an audit of my website and my social media and all of this stuff. And hey, we can help you get more leads and like, we can see all these tweaks you can make. But for me, that's not a priority right now. That's not something that we're struggling with. It's not a problem that we have in our business. And yeah, I'm sure my socials could be improved and I'm sure our website could be better, but we get hundreds of leads a month and we have lots of clients. And so that's not a core problem in my business right now. And so we're assuming a lot, and there's a lot of assumption in here as well. There's another one here that someone sent me the other day. Hey, I noticed your website built on WordPress, which is honestly quite old style or old school. And it's like, well, first of all, actually go back and check because our website isn't built in WordPress. It's built in Webflow. Secondly, you're kind of basically attacking me a little bit and saying, hey, like your website's really old, it's outdated. Have you considered this? By the way, we build websites and this is what we can do for you, right? The other mistake here that these people are making is often they're asking several questions in one message, which again is using a lot of brain power. Try to keep your questions concise, try and keep them easy to answer. So for example, this person could have said, I noticed that your website is built on WordPress, even though they've got that wrong. So let's imagine they just said it was built on Webflow. I really like X, Y, and Z about it. I'm curious, are you currently satisfied with your click-through rate? Or how do you currently measure your click-through rate? Would have been a much better approach and a much better conversation. Sort of leave this stuff out, because the thing about LinkedIn is I can click on your profile and I can see what you do. I can see what your experience is. I don't actually need to know this in a message. And most people, when they get a message from someone, will go and check out that profile and they will see like, okay, I understand what this person does. So I understand the context of this conversation. Again, another one down here is just purely a simple pitch. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'm reaching out because I can provide you with high quality appointments and qualified leads. Okay, great. We've gone straight in for the pitch here. You haven't really asked anything about me. This is just clearly a kind of automated message. So the great thing about this framework with the reason, the complement, and the anchor is it makes it feel very personalized. And I promise you, when you get into the rhythm of doing this and you practice it and you do it consistently and you know what to look out for, the school you went to, the people you have in common, all of those kind of cheat sheets that I just gave you, that can actually become a really quick process. You could do that for 4 or 5 people every single day in less than 30 minutes. And our clients do. So imagine that. Imagine what that would be like compounded over a month or 2 months or 3 months. If you genuinely reached out and connected to 5 people or connected with 5 people every single day for the next 30 days, where would your level of opportunity be compared to where it is now? How would it feel to you to have all of those conversations going? So I really, really encourage you to lean into this and get to the point where you can do this consistently, because once you can do it consistently, you can pass it to somebody else and they can do it on your behalf. So we've talked about the brain drain. Here are some better examples. Look, I've just typed these out. These are some things I kind of thought off the top of my head because I couldn't really give you specific examples I'm using without the context of the situation, and I didn't have permission from that person to share that interaction. So these are some things that I've used in the past. These are some messages that I've sent in the past. Really, really simple. So this is kind of more like a connection message. Hey, John, I just came across your work with Adidas. So this is the reason why I'm reaching out. And I see we have a mutual love for retro footwear. Right, so there's not like a huge compliment in here, but there is an anchor. Did you manage to score any free shoes? So I'm just kind of being friendly. I'm just being curious. I'm not trying to come in with any cold pitch. This could be like a little connection message. The hard thing about LinkedIn and personalizing invites is the limit to the number of characters in that message. And so it does become quite difficult. But if you get skilled at this, you can actually create and touch all of these 5 things in one short sentence. So again, I'm not suggesting these are perfect, but these are examples of a slightly less salesy approach. This one is a bit more, so I double checked, and this doesn't actually fit in the personalized invitation. So this would have to be in one of the first messages, but it's, I just came across your show reel. I was really impressed with your work, especially the project you did with Bobcat. So I'm being specific about my compliment. It shows that I've actually looked at their website. I've actually looked at the projects that they've worked on. I'm not just sending some generic thing that looks like it's been sent to everybody. And then I've just said, hey, it reminded me of my first role as a runner. So if you don't know what that is, in film, a runner is the person who kind of goes around and does all the things for the director and makes sure that everyone's got what they need. It's quite a junior role. So somebody in the film business and somebody who makes film would understand what that is, and they would kind of get that, oh, this guy's been in the film industry. He knows the term, he knows what it's like working in there. And then I've just asked them a really simple this or that question, right? Do you typically work with corporates or SMEs? And most of the time I get a pretty positive response from this kind of thing, because most people aren't getting messages that show somebody has taken the time and the effort and the energy to look at their profile, to actually see who they are, to give them a genuine compliment, and to create some kind of anchor, something you have in common, and just ask them a really easy next step question. Now, obviously, you're not guaranteed to get a response from every single person, and don't expect that, but this will significantly increase your chances. And if you do this consistently, you will land projects, I promise you. And I have been doing this for the last 5 or 6 years. And as I said, this has been tested with hundreds of our clients, and it works. So the big message here is really about starting conversations. We've got a saying in our coaching program that clarity comes from conversations. And what we really mean by that is that you can't figure out everything in your head. You have to have conversations with ideal clients if you really want to understand what's valuable to them. If you really want to understand how to build relationships and connect with them, you have to be consistently starting those conversations if you want to get clarity. So they are the 5 key elements. Why are you reaching out? What do you love about them specifically? What's the anchor? What do you have in common? What kind of value can you bring for them? Upfront, not asking for money. Value is not saying, hey, by the way, we build websites. Do you need a website? That's not value. Value is saying, hey, I thought you might find this article interesting. Hey, can I introduce you to this person in my network? Hey, by the way, we have this free tool, this scorecard, whatever it is. Would you like me to send it to you? It's being genuinely interested as a person, showing that you care and delivering some of that value up front. And if you consistently do that, I promise you, people will see you as somebody worth connecting with, and you will be able to land your dream clients. So now you know each of the 5 steps to a powerful LinkedIn DM strategy. You almost have the complete framework to start winning those dream clients. But there are 3 key principles that most people miss. And if you fail to stick to these principles, it will make this strategy way less effective. So let's quickly run through what these 3 principles are that you must follow if you want your LinkedIn DMs to land those dream clients consistently. So the first principle is that we must view this through the frame of giving, not just getting. And This is important for a few reasons. I'm going to show you some examples of where this doesn't work. But what I want you to understand is that from a psychological perspective, there is some kind of reciprocity which is created when somebody gives you something. So you feel like you want to give them something back. And that's often why when you're following people with all of this great content, you feel like you're getting something and you want to give something in return. And that could be as simple as an email address, could be as simple as some contact details, or it could be money, time, energy, whatever it is. That's just kind of how most people's brains work. The other thing this does is it takes away that element of kind of salesy spamminess, because if you know you're giving something to someone rather than getting something, it allows you to be more active in your approach to outreach. You don't mind messaging people, you don't mind reaching out because you know you've got something valuable to offer. So principle number one is you've got to come into this with the mindset of giving, not just getting. The second principle is we want to message like a millennial. So what does that mean? Well, I've got some younger cousins, and whenever I speak to them, it's always a very sort of backwards and forwards conversation. I'll ask a question, they'll respond, they'll ask the question, sort of like that. It's very conversational. Whereas if I get a message from an older member of my family, often it's this kind of big paragraph where there's life updates and what they've been up to, and they'll ask several questions in it. To be honest, it takes quite a lot of brain power to read. So when we're thinking about messaging people on LinkedIn and kind of most social media platforms, we really want to think about creating this sort of conversational tone, this experience which feels conversational, it feels sort of backwards and forwards. It's not just huge, lengthy paragraphs that are difficult to read and probably make people want to put their phone away. And that's the thing, right? Because most of these things, especially on LinkedIn, a lot of people are reading these messages on their phone. And so they're already sort of in that mode of sort of text messaging, WhatsApp. That's where their brains at. And so it's kind of really important to play into where they already are. The third key principle here is don't fear the follow-up. And this one honestly is massive. And the reason I say it's massive is because throughout the years of my experience of reaching out to people myself, building relationships and creating win-win scenarios with people, I have found that often the opportunity is created in the third or the fourth follow-up. And so we've recently recorded a podcast episode with Kai, who I mentioned in the intro, that was able to land Bentley as a client. And I would highly recommend you go and listen to that, search for the Creative Courage podcast, and you can hear Kai's story. But one of the things that he says in there is how many emails he actually had to send Bentley before they responded. Now, a lot of people have quite a lot of resistance around this because, again, it comes back to this idea of bothering people, being salesy, being spammy. But think about this for yourself. How many unread messages do you have in your inbox or in your WhatsApp or in other areas of communication right now where you genuinely are interested in that thing, or you genuinely like that person, but you just haven't had time to respond? It could even be a friend or a family member you haven't responded to yet that messaged you a few days ago. Just because somebody hasn't responded to you does not mean they don't want to respond to you or they're not interested. The other thing that we got to take into consideration is how often people use LinkedIn, how active they are, what else they've got going on right now. They might be on holiday. There's 1,000,001 things that could be going on. And having done this for 5 or 6 years now personally, and having built my business at the beginning using predominantly outreach, I know how many relationships I built, how many deals I created in the third or the fourth follow-up. So if I hadn't sent that message, if I hadn't followed up with that person, then I never would have got to work with them. And oftentimes when I follow up, people will apologize and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't see this, or it landed in my spam, or I've been away on holiday, or whatever they've been doing, right? And so often people do want to have the conversation, they do want to respond to you, but they just haven't for whatever reason. So the way I like to operate and the way I like to think about outreach is people are interested to have a conversation with you unless they tell you otherwise. And for me personally, that's been a great frame to view outreach through, and it's served me really well, and it's allowed me to create opportunities that I don't think I would have been able to create without it. So they're the three key principles. Give versus get. You've got to approach this with a mindset of giving, not just taking something from somebody. We've got to keep the messaging here short. We've got to keep it conversational, and don't be afraid to follow up with people. I hope you found this video valuable. If you did, I'd encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Come and check out some of the content that we put out. Don't forget to subscribe to the Futur channel. This is one of the best channels that I know for growing your creative business. My name is Matt Essam, and this has been a short masterclass on attracting your dream clients using DMs on LinkedIn.